I'm going to actually introduce everybody by way of the order everybody appears here. So first on the panel, we have Todd Roberts, the National Payments Practice Leader for Deloitte. And second in our panel, we have Sheila Vokey, the CEO of Central One. And third, we have Duke Roberts, the CEO of the Prairie Payments Joint Venture, and myself, Andrew Higgins. I'm the global leader of the IBM Payment Center. So before we get ready and dig right into what co-opetition is and have a few opinions on that, which will go both sides of the coin, I'm going to talk a little bit about what co-opetition is. For everybody that's never actually seen this word in a dictionary, it's really the idea that it could be advantageous for companies that traditionally compete with each other to cooperate in some areas, whether it be investment, research, innovation, in some nature to the advantage of all. So with that in mind, each of the panelists today have been very deep in this conversation and deep in this subject from a payments modernization perspective in Canada. And what I'm going to do is start with Todd. And, from your perspective, Todd, does co-opetition provide ways to share strengths and complementary advantages in ways that everybody benefits? Or on the con side of this, does it really erase those advantages by oversharing trade secrets?
So, yeah, Andrew, it's a great question and happy to be here today. I think I'd be on the pro side of this 90% of the time. The reality is if you look in other sectors, as we were talking about, as we were warming up for this panel, it's not like, the automobile manufacturers make everything that goes into a car. And increasingly you look at financial services and you look at folks like Shopify. Stripe powers many of the applications that you see in Shopify. If you look at the various banks, Visa and MasterCard provide, great services that they use for global money transfer. If you look at Interac, all financial institutions, credit unions, large banks, 290 odd players use the same underlying technology. So in the main, I think many of these services are like electricity for financial services. It doesn't matter where it comes from, so long as it's reliable, so long as it's cheap, so long as it works. I do think at the edge, you find capabilities that are, in fact, competitively differentiating. But I think they're few and far between. And I think those are the areas that you want to make sure that you over-invest in so that you have competitive advantage and differentiation. And the other things, they're table stakes, find the best way to source them at the lowest possible cost.
And Sheila, what do you feel?
I think on this one, I'm saying I'm aligned with Todd. We're seeing cooperation today in the financial services industry. There's emerging types of models that Todd alluded to there in various financial institutions. And in the end, it's about delivering choice and services. And when I think about Central One's experience, and how we deliver services that originate from others, and this is really the reason why we've going down a path of an ambitious journey of API development, et cetera, to make that facilitation of entering into collaboration models easier. An example we have is a partnership with Agility Forex, for example. It's a fintech that provides cross-border payments capabilities to credit union members, complementing other payment services we provide. And many of our clients wanted something flexible and easy to use to transfer money outside of the country. But an important area, I think, of an example that I think both Duke and I can give some flavor on is really allowing us to come back together and find the right way to cooperate within the credit union system. And that's where Duke and I and our teams have spent a lot of time in this area, really trying to better understand what that means for us. I would say since the last number of years, we've more been in a state of being competitors, each seeking credit union customers from each other. And we may still do that in some areas going forward. But I think we've really come to realize that we need to build a collaboration model where efficiencies and sharing work as much as possible will actually drive better outcomes for the credit union system. And we're really working on paving a way forward for the sake of the system and the end user. And so this is bold new world. And I think it's about you really need trust to make this work. And probably still going to be trade secrets along the way, and that's okay. But we need to find the way that we really can lean in and support each other. And I would say one of the guiding principles that I think is important to me, and I think Duke would share this as well, is if we're guided by what's the best thing for our members or our customers, that's ultimately the end game. It's about getting the right scale so that we can be efficient in the long run, provide the reliable services, but ultimately be that dependable service provider to the clients that are looking for current services and new services going forward.
And Duke, your thoughts?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I agree with Sheila. I think when I came to PPJV about 10 months ago, my observation was we were competing on the wrong front. So, for example, we would go out for a credit union just on price, and we would, for the tiny amount of difference in the price, someone might make a decision to go with C1 or PPJV. But I think the more important part was if you looked at the history going back maybe 8 years ago, I think Todd brought this up a few weeks ago. There was this concept of having one platform for the greater credit union space, and it probably makes a lot of sense if you are an outsider coming in, but that didn't come to fruition. So that we have to deal with two platforms, both different technologies, but many opportunities where there's services we want to offer together that are commoditized and overlapping, that we should build one versus two. That's kind of an architecture principle. Keep it simple and standardized as much as you can. So with that in mind, we got together and we're trying to shape, a few areas where we can do something together material and make it real. So it could be a data service. It could be a real-time rail overlay, something innovative. And we're making strides that way with proofs of concept, even starting in the next few weeks. But I think, even going back to when I started my career, I was at Microsoft. We competed very hard against IBM in the banks. And, sometimes we won, sometimes we didn't. But under the covers, IBM had a Microsoft practice, and many Microsoft people ended up going to IBM, to be in that co-opetition model. So it does mean that in the software space, there's opportunities where you do compete, usually on a competitive advantage in certain areas, whereas other times you have to become kind of partners, to get the deal and to shape the right solution for the customer. So I brought that to my mindset at PPJV. And I think one thing Sheila said is trust. We built trust. So when Sheila became CEO, I was so thrilled because that is the kind of go in, is that we trust each other. We know there's going to, like Sheila said, there's going to be times when we do compete head to head. But at the end of the day, it's for the greater good of the credit union. It's not just for one or the other entity.
So with that in mind, I think it dovetails really nicely into the next question, which is around, does it really foster innovation and develop more like an industry standard? In other words, are you doing the same thing for all and you get the benefits of that? Or, does it really, create the inefficiencies by improperly distributing the workloads? And what I mean by that is, do you get into this, we're doing it because we want to cooperate, but we're really not doing the right thing to cooperate with? Are we just arbitrarily putting workloads where they shouldn't be, when in fact they should be in your four walls? So, from that perspective, maybe Duke, you can kind of pick it up from your PPJV experience perspective and look at it from that. And then I'm going to go reverse order from you to Sheila and back to Todd.
Sure. I mean, one of the first things when I joined that got me to join really and made it interesting was, let's get a transformation over the goal line. So, things like AFT, check wires, real time, et cetera. Those are the things that we have to do. And a lot of them are not, I would say super innovative. You're moving from legacy to a cloud environment. In many cases, it will be faster, more secure. So that's good. But at the end of the day, I think it's the future state that really gives the opportunity for some innovative services. So I was very excited. I presented that to my board, and I think the pushback was first deliver what's on your plate, right? And that's what you've got to make sure you get before you go and do some shiny object. And now that we've got some of those going, I think there's a lot of appetite to innovate. So, but a lot of us are still trying to play catch ups, even with the bank. So where I came from, RBC and so on, we may be a little bit behind. We're not hugely behind, but we're still a little bit behind. So with that in mind, I think we've got to start to do something small and shape that into something innovative. I think real-time rail is probably the biggest one at the front that's coming at us that we want to get on. But many things we don't even think about, like data, AI, et cetera, that I want to bring to the table here. And those are opportunities to share, like an AI or data hub. Those are things that we could build together with C1, I believe. And it's not going to get us, more customers. It's going to serve existing ones better. And I think that there could even be opportunities for services that I build where Sheila wants to consume that, and vice versa. So we don't have to, recreate the wheel.
Sheila, yourself?
Totally agree with Duke. You can tell we've spent some time together in the recent weeks and months. So maybe just to add a little bit, it takes some work to think about where we do want to collaborate together, exactly as Duke said. And that's where we can use our own resources and leadership experts within our own organizations, but also, reach out to others and assist us relative to helping us make some of those choices and reinforce we're putting our time in the right value added areas. And, just to add a couple areas where we're working on, I think in tandem with PPJV, we've really seen some opportunities to improve showing up cohesively for the system in areas around regulation and setting realistic standards. I think that's an area we can pay some attention to. Advocating together. I think we're stronger to explain how the credit union system actually works and how regulation, in some cases, may need to be modified so that it does work effectively to keep the system, healthy and vibrant going forward. So we're much better working together on that front. And, the organizations we've been chatting with, whether it be Payments Canada, Interact, Bank of Canada, I mean, there's a lot of support and I think appreciation for us coming together and talking with one unified voice. So we've been spending some time with regulators on the design of real-time rail so that the rules are practical, and also want to make sure that I guess we're sharing insights in areas that can be commoditized. So fraud management information might be an area, for example. And lastly, I think it's not to forget that there's cooperation that is required for organizations like us to really make sure we have smooth transitions for our clients, because whether it be a credit union who has chosen to work on Central One's platform or PPJV's platform, and we need to do the right thing for the system. There will be different choices, and I think that's going to be our reality going forward with an open banking platform. So just learning how to work together and keeping the client at the front of the heart of what we're trying to do. I think that in itself builds trust, but we're doing it ultimately for our members and clients. So I think it's just trying to do things that make sense and adopting common standards and approaches to industry initiatives, and really trying to share resources and thought leadership, because what's in front of us, I totally support what Duke was saying. We have to deliver on our core plumbing of payments. That needs to work. There's, failure is not an option, but there's a lot of more exciting things coming down the pipe. And so we have to really come together and decide where do we want to work together, which takes time to sort that out, and where do we want to go off and do something and then come back and share. So lots of exciting opportunities ahead. We're still learning, but it really is exciting for us to be working together on this front.
So I'd absolutely agree with Sheila and Duke, and I'll add a few other points. And looking at some of the things that are coming in on the chat, couldn't agree more that rules and standards are table stakes, and it doesn't make sense to figure out how do you deliver the same service two different ways that are for the same set of rules and the same standards. But if I look at things like, Spotify or, Apple Music or various streaming services, they're all using the same MP3 format, but they're competing against each other to deliver better experiences, different experiences. And so I think the types of collaboration, that make sense are to ensure the credit unions have really vibrant overlays, other services that they can have in market that are going to compete with the large banks, but are going to compete with fintechs, are going to compete with the likes of Shopify going forward. And to Trisha's question in the chat, how do you guard against the lowest common denominator? I think innovation has to happen at the edge. I don't think we find debates about the rules. No one's arguing what's an MP3. No one's arguing how, the Bluetooth, standard works. I think the issue is going to be how do you provoke and promote, innovation at the edge. I think more competition will help that, but I think importantly, the work that Duke and Sheila are driving to bring new overlay services to the large credit union base and doing that, in collaboration because it's expensive. It's a lot of work, and the bar is going up year over year. So I think focusing the innovation on things like data, open banking, and other differentiated services has huge potential and is really needed by the credit union sector.
So it begs the question, though, when you get right down to it, I hate to say this, but you guys agree too much. So we're going to have to mix this up a little bit. Let's talk about penetration of new markets. Let's talk about going after new clients. Understandably, this is one of those areas where you could actually breed a great deal of, jointly going after new markets, or at least enabling yourselves to go after new markets. But it could also breed a lot of distrust when you're doing collaborations and, you actually are going after very similar clients as such. So, I guess that's where we have to kind of look at what are the pros and the cons associated with collaboration. And how have you guys been seeing this so far? I mean, you've hinted on it a little bit, but maybe, Sheila, you can kind of lay into that a little bit more and tell us how you're dealing with, building on that whole theme of trust. Because ultimately, collaborations are going to be very ineffective unless you can build that trust and maintain that trust and have a governance across where you're both thriving.
Yeah. Let me try to kick this one off. It's still under development, but we've talked about trust, and trust takes time. And I think the motivation we both have within Central One and PPJV is what is really the purpose that's guiding us. And we go back to that as our core principles. So, it's going to take some time. I think we want to start with some proof of concepts and demonstrate that we really are working together. It's not just two leaders, Duke and I, it's our teams. And we're really keeping focused on what's the benefit of the ultimate customer and the credit union brand at the end of the day being center of our common work, making sure that there's really clear benefits in terms of efficiencies and competitive benefits. One of the cons is it could be clunky on the governance. It could take some more time. But on the other hand, it's like a project that if you don't do your planning up front and poke holes at what you're trying to achieve and look at different alternatives, you may start a project, spend too much money and not get what you want. So I think putting multiple heads together and challenging ourselves, and we come to the table with different lenses, different experiences. So we're bringing that diversity there, and where I think we have the trust at the moment to call each other out, and I think we have our hearts focused on not jeopardizing the core foundational stuff we're doing today separately. That needs to happen. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't spend money inefficiently going forward to develop the same thing, cause more confusion in the system about, which product is better, come up with different standards around data from one credit union to another. That just fundamentally doesn't seem to make sense. And so right now we're just being grounded on doing the right thing more broadly. So it is less confusing. We can be more efficient. We can leverage getting appropriate resources. Resources in these areas are hot commodities across the industry, right? So I don't think there's much benefit Duke and I fighting for the same individual. We need to hire a skill we don't have. I think we're both open to considering, do we do it together? Those kind of things. So we don't have it all sorted out, that's for sure. But I think we've tried the approach of being fiercely competitive. I think that erodes trust, causes confusion, and really ends up wasting energy, defending a position. At the end of the day, payments is needs to be, I think, Todd, you said cheap, right? And effective and reliable. So there's not much room there for wasting time and energy on competing. So I'll stop there and pass to whoever you want to go to next, Andrew.
Duke, do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I echo what Sheila's saying. I think the addressable market is kind of fixed. So, there's approximately 300 credit unions. I've got approximately 80, 75, 80, and Sheila's got the rest. I think that's how it kind of breaks down. There's some that have not decided, on their payment provider in the cloud, but those are relatively few. And I think the key, is getting the volumes from those signed up. So you're right, Sheila. We used to compete on the last, what I call long tail, a few credit unions
Yep.
left over that haven't decided, right? And spending a lot of resources and time trying to figure out how to onboard their very complex core banking system or digital channel. And those are scraps, I would almost say, at the end of the day. And the model's not really optimized for making money; it's optimized for price and volume. So the more volumes we bring on, the price is brought down for the credit unions that consume it. So I think where the bigger opportunity, I think, is in terms of this new model is new customers. Maybe they're not credit unions. Maybe they're sort of other banking entities or similar types of fintechs and so on that could consume services as we build them. And that's where I think there could be both an opportunity to collaborate and make a model that works and a service that we could offer to the market, or in some cases compete. There could be a service I can't build and Sheila builds it that others want to consume. That's fine. But I think overall, though, I think it's it's not so much an optimal model for competing head to head. It's just more of a, I've got my Prairie credit unions, I've got my ownership model of the 3 provinces. So those are the core customers I'm addressing at the moment. And Sheila's got others, some of which are in Ontario and BC that we don't necessarily compete against. So that's my thoughts on that one.
And Todd, back to you.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting ground game between C1 and PPJV, which is important, right? Which is you're both service organizations. And so I think, competing to deliver great service to connect to national payments infrastructure, which is kind of the same. And so, differentiating based on the level of service that you provide, I think, is an important part of healthy competition in the sector, because when PBJV does something better or C1 does something better, it encourages both of you to up the game. And I think really strong competition between the credit unions themselves and the credit unions competing against fintechs, new entrants, big banks, and they're going to make decisions to source capabilities differently. So I don't think cooperation means a lack of competition. I think what it is a means to enable credit unions to compete on a level playing field and innovate faster and deliver better client experiences that work for their members. And best credit union wins, and sometimes they'll pick Sheila's organization for X, and sometimes they'll pick Duke's organization for Y. And I think the credit union system is best served by ensuring that there is choice where choice matters. I don't think choice really matters on utility commoditized services, but choice does matter on things that are differentiated. And it'll be interesting to watch the relative balance going forward of what's a commodity service done the most efficient way, and what are some of the opportunities that enable credit unions themselves to take these services and deploy them and compete with each other and against other competitors.
So that actually does segue nicely into a theme that both of you, or a couple of you actually drove to, and that is you're not competing with each other as much as you're banding together to, let's say, punch above your weight, work in a big banking environment where you're having to compete with much larger banks. So does this co-opetition model truly get you that benefit where, you're a group working together, either lobbying or, competing with much larger banks within Canada?
Mhm.
Now, who wants to kick that one off? Anybody want to raise their hand? Maybe Todd, I'm going to push it right back to you and get your perspective on it.
Sure. Like, I think it's really important that things like regulation, legislation, standards, rules reflect what's unique about the credit union space. If you look purely at institution count, there's more credit unions by number than there are chartered banks. And if you look at rules within, Payments Canada around who can be a member, what are they permitted to do, how does clearing and settlement, work out, there are real complexities that are important for the credit union voice to be heard. And sometimes it's hard to get, 280 voices to be on the same page. But I think it's critically important that C1 and PPJV, along with other parts of the credit union space, whether it's CUCC or LCUC, find ways to speak with one voice. It's way too easy in the credit union space for there to be 10 cheerleaders on a topic. Like, doesn't help the cause. If I look at open banking, or if I look at digital ID or tokenization or any number of future topics, I think it's critically important for the credit union space to be able to say, we have a voice. It's as uniform as it can be. And, they play seminal roles in making sure that the evolution in Canada, ensures that there's a vibrant space for credit unions going forward. So I think it's critical that there be fewer voices that are able to represent the totality of the credit union system, because nobody has time to listen to 280 voices saying different things.
And Sheila, your thoughts?
Yeah, it's tough for me to not agree with Todd there. From an ecosystem point of view, Central One is stronger in being able to support the system if we are working together to really challenge larger competitors, right? Um, Fighting with each other isn't helping, and that's where working together we're stronger nationally, because apart we're regional players, and it's going to be increasingly probably more important in the face of new market entrants down the road. And the big players are leading and have more funds to put towards some of these initiatives. So I think we need to work together. We need to find the way to collect the right voices at the table, so we're representing the needs of the system. There's a lot of commonality there. There are some differences, but the pace of change is not going to slow down. We all have, you know, focus on getting the right skills, as I mentioned before, and expensive initiatives, and we need the right expertise. So combining our experts, I think it puts us in a better position to compete against the other entrants or the other larger financial institutions. And I think we have a history of being creative and agile. And that's where working together and getting the experts across the system, getting that alignment up front, and really putting the focused energy in the right places, I think it will serve us well.
And Duke, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely agree. I think, one thing we've already started to do is meet collectively, like, for example, C1 and ourselves with Interac and Payments Canada, and having that one conversation. And I think what I'm hearing is more respect for that approach, as opposed to everyone coming, ad hoc all over the place and broken telephone. And even being able to ask the right questions and get the right answer, and it's the right answer once, and we don't have to go back and forth. But I think it's also the Interacts and the Payments Canada executives giving us the feeling that they understand our problem, it's not a bank. We don't have one system. We've got like 18 different patterns of core banking systems and digital channels that we've got to address just to onboard the credit unions in my space, and Sheila's is probably even more than that. So you've got every conceivable architecture challenge, and when you go to a person or an executive that's making major decisions on that without your involvement, it's going to be a disaster, I think. So I think we have to have the right conversations, but also the right level, and make sure that we get our point across about how complex that is. And it could be as simple as timelines. Like, for e-transfer, some of the timelines were very much like the banks. Well, we weren't solving the same problem, not even close. So they understood it after the conversation that, yeah, we do need some more time relative to a bank to get that problem solved. And there could even be unique challenges. Like one of the ones we've got is latency, on the message for e-transfer. That's not easy to solve for, and it's never been done. So in that case, it may take even longer to do that. And that's going back to Sheila's point about talent. You need the top architects engaged, and it's not going to benefit if I have that service and Sheila doesn't. I think we both need it. So you want to make sure you could share those experts across different problems that we're trying to address together. And it's not a competing question. It's just making sure the credit unions actually have a payments platform that works. So that's what I'm excited to do, but also just to keep the that kind of consensus building going with C1 and others.
Well, and it gets back to a theme that a couple of you actually are raising around. You've got big banks there that are dealing with their problems, but they got deep pockets as well compared. And when you start looking at your problems are any less complicated, or perhaps, there's a perspective on that, but they aren't less complicated. You have just as many core banking systems to plug into, and you have uniqueness of each credit union to represent. So you actually have a very complicated problem to address. And, money doesn't grow on trees. And, obviously within this payments modernization, everybody has to put that investment in, but the deep pockets aren't necessarily there. So I'm assuming, based on a lot of what you've all said, there's a perspective on collaboration is almost essential because of cost alone, if not, the other benefits we've talked about. So maybe Sheila, you can start with that. And has this been one of this isn't so much a pro and con, but has this been an investment that has been truly, taking the priority of Central One? And is that true of PPJV? And for Todd, have you seen this across the market? And are people, credit unions paying less into this than, say, the banks are? So Sheila.
I don't really know what the banks are putting into this, but I would say my assumption would be we have put less into this. But, if you take the example that the credit union system will have two core payment systems, we've in effect been inefficient there in the costing perspective to the system. If we keep doing that, it further complicates the cost to our system. It doesn't make sense. This is millions of dollars. Irrespective of how many million one institution puts into another, it's a huge hit on the cost of these new modernized systems. And I frankly, I don't think any organization can afford to put that extra cost pressure on its customers. And, payments is supposed to be a free utility. It's a pretty expensive one. And so cost is obviously a really important one and front of mind, I think, for all of us. I think war on talent is another reason to try to work together, which Duke just mentioned. And then there's another one I just forgot what it was now. But, it's about really understanding where we want to go together. And I think for the system, for the credit union system, try to avoid confusion, because at the end of the day, credit unions expect their member stakeholder organizations to have their best interests at heart. And I think the easiest way for us to demonstrate that is to show that we're working together. and we're working together to compete against other factors going on in the industry. And we don't have the excess funds to waste or the time to waste. I don't think it makes any sense for Central One to be behind PPJV or PPJV to be, ahead. It doesn't really matter. We need to provide good, reliable services and help each other out. So I'd go back to that core principle of being focused on the end customer.
Excellent. And yourself, Duke?
Yeah, I think my main observation is when I joined about 10 months ago, the program had made decisions that are still, irreversible, I would say. So, for example, a long-term contract with IBM to build our platform. Sheila, similarly with Fiserv. So some of the decisions aren't reversible, and they do cost. You're right. There's a big cost to that platform. But there's opportunities to revisit it. So I also observed it was under scoped. So we looked at a rebaseline and we looked at each stream to see where we could make some savings by shaping the work better, scoping it better. I think there was a bit of a bias towards just keep adding scope and letting the project kind of lean into the next 5 years. So we reined it in, and we also thought about things like, do we really need to build a Ferrari every time, or could we build the MVP and make it work first and then go from there? But even with all that said, there is an increasing cost, and that gets borne by the credit unions in the price. So one thing I did was bring team members in that have a lot of expertise on cost management, and how to shape contracts with our vendors and partners like IBM and others. So that's I guess good financial and good business management, but it's not going to be a cheap venture in any case. It's a multi-year program, and there's many things that are not controllable. Some of the controllables we're going to address, and others we'll just have to live with.
And yourself, Todd?
So large banks have their own complexities, but they don't argue about, is the photocopier going to have A4 paper, or is it going to have 8.5 by 11 or 8.5 by 14? They have 8.5 by 11, right? And so just because there's a whole bunch of credit unions doesn't mean that all ideas are good. So being clear about the things that actually do matter, and enforcing a degree of commonality when there isn't a good reason to go down different paths. So, I do think the banks are more disciplined than the credit union space in ensuring that, they focus on standardization where they can. And looking at some of the questions, in the chat, I'd say, yep, other financial institutions are ahead in things like ISO 20022. And how do you take that standardized data and be able to make it work for small businesses? Credit unions have tons of small business customers. It's not that many small business customers that are being helped out by their credit unions right now. And to say, here's how I'm going to deliver, e-transfer for business or the RTR with rich data payload to say, how can I do end-to-end accounts receivable, accounts payable, invoicing. They need that from their credit unions so that they can compete against the Amazons and Walmarts of the world. So, I think there are very good opportunities for PPJV and C1 to sort out how do you collaborate on data, not just on payments, but how do you collaborate on data with payments to deliver services that credit unions really need to help their small and mid-sized businesses compete in a world of stiff competition, low margins, and increasingly digital interactions.
Excellent. And we have a 10-minute warning, so I'm going to wrap up with one question left for all of you. And that's really, when we did the description for this, it was around co-opetition, obviously with payments modernization being the key theme, but, bringing it back to the fact that, or the idea that this is an exciting future and the change is actually good, and co-opetition is the way to succeed in the future. So with that in mind, where do you guys fall in that? Are you guys excited about the future? Are you, dreading the next few years of payments modernization, or how do you feel? So, Duke, let's start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I feel super invigorated by this kind of work. So, I did come from a big bank, a blue one, and I similarly had some really interesting challenges there. And, from big data right to DevOps, when I was doing the transformation for digital. I think what I observed in the credit union space is it's a little bit behind. That's why it's exciting, because some of the things I've learned I could bring to the table. But, I quickly realized there's a gargantuan challenge to get what we've already agreed to deliver delivered. And I had to get the right team together, the right mindset, and I think we've all done that. So now it's just a matter of what's next, and what's next to me is always, the new thing, the new service that we could provide, but also something that may have not been done before. So a lot of these new services we're talking about, like, there has been some in Europe, but I still think it's pretty immature. So things like APIs, things like insights into data that Todd was talking about, these are all things that are challenging and invigorating. And that's why the team I've got, I think, is joining and staying. And so far, we've been very successful to do that. And we've managed to get people from my old work at Microsoft, RBC, to come and do this kind of work. It's exciting, it's fun, it's on the vanguard. But again, it's not easy. And if it was, it wouldn't be. I don't think a lot of us would do it. It's just, we want a challenge, but we want a realistic challenge. So.
And yourself, Sheila?
Well, I think Duke summed it up really nicely there. It's definitely exciting, and it's challenging. And I think that's what motivates a lot of people when you really buy into the purpose of what we're trying to do. It's not repeating the past. It's bringing innovation to the table, openness to doing things differently, and really being guided, as you said, Andrew, doing the right thing to help small businesses across our country. And I think that's where the credit union space can really exceed, because they know their customers very well. We need to catch up to other institutions that have spent a bit more time on this than us. That's not all bad. I mean, we can catch up. We can learn from what others are thinking of doing, and we can leverage partners with other organizations. But it's definitely exciting, because it's everything Duke said. It's about putting our heads together, coming up with better experiences, and finding the right path forward. And if we fail, let's fail fast and course correct quickly without ego on the table, and sort things out. So co-opetition and coming back together with one voice as much as possible is hugely exciting for the system. I think the system needs it from us. And I think we're able to attract people who are like-minded in really going the mile on this journey with us. And we've got some good talent collectively. Probably need some more talent. If anyone wants to join our team, please give Duke or I a call. Always looking for great talent, but it really is an exciting time. It's going to be a journey. And wish us lots of success. Well, happy to come back next year and give you an update how things are going.
Wonderful. And Todd, we do have a few questions, but maybe we just have your final thoughts, and then I'll go to a question.
Yeah, I see we got 1 minute on the clock, so I'll be super fast. We've finished lap 1 of a 10-lap race, and we're all kind of tired. We have to get over that, right? So there's another 9 laps to go. So I think it's going to be really important to keep the eye on the future, make sure that we can do the second and third laps as easily as possible, because there's another 7 to go. And it's the back half of this game that's going to be way more interesting than the front half of this game. So, collaborating, to win as the sledding gets tougher is going to be what I would really strongly encourage you folks to focus on, because you're going to need the strength to win that part of the race, because it's that part of the race that's going to be most important to your future.
And it does look like we're going to run out of time here very quickly. So I'm going to thank you, everybody, for joining. This has been a wonderful discussion. And it sounds like everybody is excited about, cooperating towards payments modernization as we move forward, and collaborating. So it does look like a good theme today. So with that in mind, I'm going to pass it back. And thank you for your time today.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Andrew.
Cheers, everyone. Thanks, Andrew.